This holiday season, why not head to the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting, Bet Online. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, Bet Online provides you with constant real-time odds and action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. The largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA, college basketball, NHL to UFC and boxing. Head to the website today and see why BetOnline is America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. Welcome to another edition of Believe in Giants. Bob Papa, two-time Super Bowl champion Carl Banks. And Carl, it was an unpleasant Thanksgiving in Dallas. The Giants wind up losing 27-20. Game wasn't as close as the 27-20. Sure, the Giants had a chance late, but I mean, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, talking about this game coming in, we were joking around like, watch Rito Dowdle get his first 100-yard rushing game.
Yeah,
Sure
and
enough,
he did. He did. So this is you got two bad teams playing, and one team played worse than bad. They played below, or maybe they met their average, and Dallas played slightly above average because their best players were their best players, right? And that's made the difference in the game. Whereas, if you can look around the Giants roster of what's available, were their best players their best players? And I would venture to say no. There's a phrase that kind of sums up these players' performances, and we should probably get into a few of them because they're young. They're either going to be promising or disappointing. But there's a phrase that I often use in my business is water finds its level. And I think that's what we're seeing with some of these young players. Deonte Banks had, I think that's what we're seeing with some of these players. Deonte Banks has basically leveled out to where this team is, right? And it's easy to look at him and say, man, here's another miss by Joe Schoen. But if we look at where he ended the year last year, which looked like the needle was pointing up, and this year he has been nothing close to that. And it's okay, is this a product of a losing season? Is this a product of a guy, things have to go well for him to be going well? Has he gotten lax? He's a shell of what he was. And, he was just starting to come around as a pro. He was, he's just a cornerback, but he was showing promise as a young cornerback by the end of last season. This year, he's leveled out, right? You've got Evan Neal, where it's just, I just don't know where that is. He's below water right now. And that's putting it mildly. What he put on tape against Dallas was just, it just was not good. Kid like Cordell Flott is starting to turn the corner as a pro. I like him. He's a guy that seems to be fighting to stay above the level of this team, and he's getting better each and every game. And this is kind of where I want this young group of players to get to. They've got to strive to be above their circumstance because it's what you put on film. It's what the evaluators are going to look at going into the next season. Obviously, they are not going to get rid of a talent such as Malik Nabers. But my suggestion to Malik Nabers, and I know this is tough, right? And it's a lot of they put a mic in his face and he's going to speak his heart. But this is a kid, Bob, that has probably lost nothing his whole life in sports. He's probably been winning everywhere at every level. And I would encourage that young man to continue to work his craft. I know the body language is bad sometimes, and it should be. Now he's an individual, and I'm giving him grace because if you look at some of the balls thrown to him during that Dallas game, you can see what the body language was, what it was. But that's the situation you're in, right? So I could see why, at times he's frustrated. But the thing that I would encourage him is to, and I don't think he'll ever lose his winning mentality. But just understand when you are on the field, you're getting everybody else's best shot. So it's also a matter of what you put on film so that, when this thing gets turned around, um, in which I believe it will, because they're not gonna let a player like you rot of your talent. And this is, I'm not calling him Lawrence Taylor, but Lawrence Taylor was the best player on a bad team for a long time until they started to put some pieces around him. I am pretty certain that when you hit on a guy like him, you're not going to sit up and let him flounder. Um, there's a lot, obviously there's a lot to be said about some of the draft picks. Um, these last couple of years, there have been some good picks. I don't think anybody has been great, um, but guys have leveled out. Like water has found its level. Um, a guy like Kayvon Thibodeau, last year he was a double-digit sack guy under Wink Martindale, right? So they used him to his abilities. This year, he's mistake prone. Had three penalties, one roughing the passer penalty. And he's working, he's working hard. Um, but again, it's also what a guy like him puts on tape because he's a top round draft choice. And so he's the future of this Giant team. He's not Micah Parsons, so let's forget about that. Um, he's not Bosa. He's a different style of player. Um, what are game-changing plays? He does it a little differently, or he has the ability to do it differently, and we've seen that from him. We've seen it in Washington. We've seen last year multiple times during a game he's made major plays. Now he's got to continue to work that way, but again, his circumstances haven't been great. Like this defense is awful, right? They can't stop anybody. I think the most consistent thing he's done, and it's almost consistent but not quite, is play the run well. He sets the edge well. I don't have an issue with how he pass rushes. He's just got to keep working. But you look at a guy in one system, he's phenomenal. In this current system, um, injury aside, he was okay. He's been okay. He just hasn't hit his stride. Um, but this defense hasn't allowed anybody to hit their stride. I mean, again, I look at a lot of things in terms of how they play certain schemes. And I can tell you, and again, I always have to preface this because I have not talked to a coach. I haven't asked the coach a question, and I don't sit in their meetings. But I do have a pretty trained eye on some of these things. I would pretty much wager that as much as they address the run in their meetings, I'm pretty sure that they don't go over run fits. Run fits it's a walkthrough thing. It's not even a full speed practice and patch thing. Run fits it's a thing that's often overlooked across the league. Um, Run fits are okay. We're going to walk through when this play comes inside zone or when this outside zone play. My inside linebackers, you're going to walk up to this lineman who's pulling through the hole, and you're going to fit. Your fit is your left shoulder outside arm free or right shoulder inside arm free. But you've got to get it separation and move. What I've seen, and I paid attention to it closely in this Dallas game, is linebackers run up in there and they give their body up. They just make a big collision, but they can't help on the play. And so the running back just runs through the hole. That's what, and again, I've been taught by the best in the business, right? Al Grove and Bill Belichick and those guys, all we did, if we walked through everything, it was walking through techniques, how we should fit on a particular play, how if we get blocked, where we should get blocked at, right? But always staying alive. I can tell you that doesn't happen. And if it does, it's not happening enough. That's not unique to the Giants. That's around the league. There are a lot of teams and
Which is why there's
coordinators.
so many missed tackles around the league.
Right. There are so many coordinators that have never even heard of what a run fit is, right? They'll talk to it. They'll say, you got to take it on this way. But when you use these walkthroughs, it's not just walking to your responsibility, but just walking to your run fit, right? If we had a walkthrough and a guy just went to his responsibility, he'd get screamed at. He would be like, no, I want you to show me where you're going to be body wise, hand wise, and if the ball cuts inside, where you're going to be, ball cuts outside. But I see that a lot, right? I see that across this linebacking core, and they get taught theory, but run fits are important. So I say all that to say, Thibodeau has been up and down. He's been just okay this year. Last year, he was phenomenal. And I think the needle he was ascending. But this year, he's, water finds its level. Everybody's flatlined on this defense. So there's a lot of work to be done, but you can't throw these kids out. And people will look at this team and say they have no talent. They do. They have some bad players too, but they have talent. And they just have to be in systems that are conducive to their skill set. You have to have flexibility in making sure that you can use those skill sets to the ability of these kids. And right now, it just looks, and this again, I ain't taking shots, I'm just giving you my opinion. It just looks like they're just playing a system. I don't know how they're coaching them. I definitely know they're not dumb kids. They didn't draft dumb kids. They have intelligent kids. So, but they're not bad players. And again, there are some bad players on the roster. I suspect they're going to be gone. But my bigger concern is, how do you get the most out of your good players? And they're putting on film, Malik is frustrated. I get it. But I don't want him to lose that edge, right? I want everybody, like I say, water finds its level. He's up here. The water's got to rise to him, right?
Okay, but let me ask you this,
Sure.
Carl, from a fan standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
For people that have not played the game on a high level or whatever, when you say after the game you don't care if you drop 6 balls a game, just keep them coming my way,
Mm-hmm.
just sends a horrible message to
It
your
does.
fans. I
It
mean,
does.
now
Well,
listen, I'm gonna defend him in one regard. If you look at the receivers in the NFL that are targeted at the highest rate,
mm-hmm.
they're gonna have a bunch of drops, because if you look at the drop leaders the last couple of years, they're
Yeah,
some of the best receivers in the game. So that
right.
comes part of it. If you're going to throw it to a guy 11 times a game or
Yeah,
12 times a game, there are going to be drops in there, especially when you're not playing with Mahomes or Josh Allen or Joe Burrow or Lamar Jackson, and the
yeah,
Giants don't have any quarterbacks of that level. But I
right.
think I think the fans are so frustrated because it feels like all this guy wants to do is be targeted 80,000 times a game. How about catch the ball?
He should be. CD Lamb dropped about 4 gimmies in the game before he
Could
left
have turned the
injured.
game around.
Yeah. But my concern is those are things, yeah, you probably don't want to hear those things. And it's, from a timing standpoint, your team is losing, right? And so nobody wants to hear those things. But water finds its level. And he ain't going down to where they are right now. So he's gonna stay here. His attitude is there, and yeah, he wants the football. And for those fans, I get it. The optics are not great, but just understand where he is, and probably demand that your team meet him where he's at, not have him meet the team where they're at, because where they're at right now ain't where he wants to go. So, but I do encourage the young man to just don't lose his fire. Listen, he's going to say what he's going to say because people are baiting him into it, not baiting him into it, but walking him into some things by some of the questions. And this is part of the game. When you're losing, people need sound bites. But his body language, I kind of get that part of it, because the balls are all over the place being thrown to him, right? He's pirouetting and doing some
Well,
other things.
he saved Locke 2 interceptions.
Yeah, yeah,
Easily.
yeah.
Easily.
But the thing that I do want him to do is catch the ones that are catchable. And yes, they should. Yeah, I understand when he says, just keep throwing it to me. I don't care if I drop 6, right? That's the mentality of a 3-point shooter. You miss all the ones you don't take, right? So give him the opportunities because he gives you the best chance. But I want him to value possessions. If the team has to come to his level, if the water has to rise to his level, he's got to make some that they throw to him, right? But that Dallas game, I got no issue with what I saw. He was frustrated. I mean, that the quarterback play was not great. It was not good at all. I mean, Locke made some plays when he made some plays, and when he didn't, they were not good. And
And I'm going to give Drew Lock a little bit of a break here, too, on a short week
sure.
with just a walkthrough and finding out the day before the game as you're leaving to go to Dallas that, oh, by the way, you're starting and
Mhm.
you haven't played in a game. Well, I mean, he had a little mop up duty, but reps and all that other stuff. That's a really tough spot.
Yeah, listen, Bob, I'm not crapping on Locke. It is what it is, right? And I'm rooting for him to be successful. I'm not playing favorites. I want him to be great. I'm just talking in the context of what you saw. I mean, we can kind of sort through why the cause and effects of it, but the reality is there was some balls out there that Nabers had to bail him out on, and I'm sure he'll be better this week. And I'm sure that's, you listen to him in his post-game press conference, he's like, I'm not dwelling on that. I got to get ready for the next game. And that's the attitude that you should have. But water finds its level. Um, I'm going to look at Malik Nabers, and it doesn't matter if he's a rookie or 10-year vet. That's the level that this team has to rise to attitude-wise. His performance can be better, but those around him can be better, and then he'll be even better. But we have to kind of sort through what this roster looks like, because everybody has there's not a lot of a daylight between rosters in this league, right? It's just a matter of some of those players are getting the most out of their abilities. Some of those players are in systems that allow them to be their best. But there are some bad players on the roster. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. And they're going to be gone. But these young drafted players that I just listed, and even Micah McFadden is he's probably having his best year, and it's not even what he could be. But there's some talent there. And what happens, Bob, is when you have a bad team and your drafted players are playing at a low level where the water is, the level is low, people will look at that and say, oh, these guys aren't any good, and that Joe Schoen missed on way too many players, and these guys are just not very good. And our personnel, meaning I'm speaking in the voice of the fan, our personnel department is awful. They can't pick players. I've said this when Jerry Reese was there. I've said this when Dave Gettleman was there. Picking players is not an exact science. What you need, though, are your hits to be so loud that nobody focuses
Hakeem Nicks,
on the misses. Yeah.
Hakeem Nicks,
Yeah.
JPP,
Yeah.
Kenny Phillips, Odell Beckham Jr., Saquon Barkley.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
You want the hits to be so loud that people don't focus on the misses. And, when you have a Saquon Barkley, Eric Flowers wasn't good at all, but he was just the only guy. It was a lot of other players that they didn't quite hit on.
Oh, no.
Nobody focused on because the hits were so loud. And that's where the Giants are not able to change the focus of fans, because every team, again, picking players is not an exact science. You can look at a lot of things and say, okay, they line up with what we want, and then you put him out on the field, and the human element comes into play. And then you find out, well, if situations aren't going well for him, he's in the tank. Or why was he so good at the end of last year and he comes into this year and he's no good? And conversely, a guy like Cordell Flott was like, he's got all his ability and he just can't get it together. And then all of a sudden he clicks, right? Now you feel good about the fact that you have him on your roster because he's going to factor in your plans, because he's now an NFL cornerback. He's locked in, right? So, Tyrone Tracy, he's a hit, right? Now, if they could get a little more consistency, that hit will be even louder, and people won't look at the fact that Gray is just a special teamer, right? And then if Gray finds his space in special teams, if he can just not fumble the football,
well, that's a problem.
That's a problem, right? But now you've got depth. That people would look at that position and say they got depth, right? Because they got Tracy, Singletary, and Gray. But right now, people are looking at Gray and say, why'd they draft him when all he is a special teams player? Well, because the other guy is pretty good, but Gray's got to become a pro. Like, you're fumbling the football, bro. You handle the football. You're in your job requirement, right? Your job responsibilities is handling the football securely. You're failing at that at a rate that is not great for your career.
Well, and the other thing is you saw in some of the games this year, teams are purposely kicking the ball to him, right? Whereas the Giants with Turpin, they wanted every ball out of the back of the end zone. You could see in some of these games we've seen, the strategy has been to hit the low liner to about the 1 yard line and they don't kick it They don't kick it to Smith Marset.
Right.
They kick it to Gray. They want
Yep.
Gray handling the ball, and they want him fielding it at the 1 yard line because they feel
Sure.
pretty confident that they're going to get him pinned inside the 30. And now you throw the fumble component into this. It's a
Yeah.
smart strategy.
And, fans have varying opinions, and they can be very extreme. And this is a season, the last couple, but this one in particular, where they've been extreme in terms of how they're evaluating players. And they're not wrong, but I don't agree with some of the assessments that some of these kids don't have talent. Like I said, Evan Neal is who he is. Okay, what is John Michael Schmitz? He's inconsistent at best. He gets beat in the worst ways. And then you ask yourself, well, is this offensive line, in terms of the pieces that are there, is it like a game of Jenga? When one guy's out, it destabilizes the other guy, and it puts the focus on Schmitz, right? Andrew Thomas is not coming back. This is not an excuse for the way John Michael Schmitz has played, because he's got to get better, right? And he's got to get better when things aren't good around the rest of the offensive line. But if you can't hold up on the edges at tackle, meaning Evan Neal, that weakens one part of it. And then if they focus on John Michael Schmitz and exploiting him, it's the Jenga tower, right? They just pull in pieces and see what falls. And Evan Neal, like I said, what he put on tape in Dallas, it's, you probably have to close your eyes when you see a few of these plays. But John Michael Schmitz is now, he's the focal point. Now they're saying, well, there were two other centers better than him, and he's old and he's not going to get better. Well, when they drafted him, they probably thought they would have some things in place that would either help him develop at a slower pace. But right now, he's on the clock, right?
Right. He's got to
on the
get
clock.
stronger, too. I mean,
Yeah.
because he came in undersized to start with.
But he's a wrestler, right? So the thing that I did expect from a guy who's a wrestler is the ability to play with leverage, right? His hands and his footwork at times, he misses a lot of hand placements, right? He misses his punch, and got to get better at it. I mean, he's literally on the clock. But you can make a case for, well, if certain things were in place, he would be better. Well, you got to be better when things are not in place.
Correct.
Right?
Well, because you're not an undrafted free agent.
Correct.
Or a 7th round pick. You were a 2nd round pick.
Correct.
You got to be part of the solution.
Yeah. And so, like, a guy like that is on the clock, because water finds its level, and he's low. That level is low, and he's got to get it better, irregardless of what else is on the offensive line. So young players on this team, which is the future of this team, they've got to now, this is the time where they've got to really compete. No matter where your record is, you've got to be where Malik Nabers is. You got to be uncompromising or willing to do the hard things to get to where he is. He's not coming down to your level, because he ain't lost anything. He's never lost anything. And it burns him up that they're losing. So he's not gonna adapt a loser mentality. And he looks like an outlier. He looks like a rebel rouser now. He looks like he's a malcontent. Well, he is malcontent because they're losing. They're losing. And yes, you guys can focus on his drops. And I'm saying it here. Young men value possessions. But I get your point. And I'm going to keep encouraging you. Yes, tell them to throw you the ball. Because the ball in your hands is better than the ball in a lot of other players out their hands. And you make everybody better. So don't lower your standards to where this season is. You keep it up here and make sure this team comes to where you are, because that's the only way. Again, when you draft young talent, that's the mentality that gets your organization going in the right direction. Now, as it relates to the head coach, I think, and I'm just talking about in his relationship with this receiver, I don't spend any time in meetings. When I have conversations with Daboll, I don't ask him any of these things, but I would say he's got to be more thermostat than thermometer, right? Thermostat means you can adjust it. You can turn it up. You can cool it off, right? A thermometer is just either here or here,
I never thought
right?
of it that way.
And I think with him and this talent, and not just with Nabers, but with all of these young players, you got to know which guys you adjust the thermometer to, and the thermostat to turn up heat on. Others you turn down, right? Um, but with Malik Nabers, this is going to be a partnership um, where he's got to be um, accountable for certain things. You've got to be able to hold him accountable, but it's within the construct of a partnership, right? He wants to be great, right? He's got to feel that this team wants to meet him where he is. Because if he can give you what you ask for, you've got to give him what he's asking for. And that's kind of a Parcells thing too. I'll give you everything I got. You give me everything you got, right? And then it opens up the door for real criticism, right? And right now it's just thermometer, right? It's either Leak, look at this, or Leak, look at that, or great job, Leak. Sometimes you got to be within that great job. I'm going to need you to do this, and I'm going to stay on you. I'm going to turn up the heat until I see this from you, because you can be at this level. And
It's
this is
interesting that you brought up Parcells, because I think there'd be a lot of people fans that just watch from the outside
Mhm.
that don't really know how all of this necessarily works, because they might say, guarantee you Mike Tomlin doesn't have any thermostat with his wide receiver. I'm guarantee you that so and so. I guarantee you Belichick never had a thermostat with guys. I guarantee you, they it was their way and they demanded it and they expected it and they this and they that. And I guarantee you that Dan Campbell doesn't have a thermostat right now in Detroit. But when you mention Parcells, well, he last coached the Giants in 1990. So
Mhm.
that's a whole different era. That's a pre-free agency. That's a different athlete than is in the league today. But you use the word thermostat, even with a guy like Parcells, who from the outside, Giants fans and a lot of other fans probably are not thinking that existed.
Mm-hmm. And I can assure you that Mike Tomlin coaches with a thermostat. His wife has this T-shirt line of all of his sayings, right? And one of his saying is, "The standard is the standard," but he knows all players aren't equal. But he wants all of these players to live up to a standard. How he gets them there, it depends on where he wants to set his thermostat, right? He's got a wide receiver who drives people crazy. Some of the things he does, right? But then his talent, when they throw it up to him, I'm talking about Pickens, he makes hell of a plays. But then he does some of the craziest things after the whistle, and he gets these crazy penalties. But you know what? Mike brings him where he needs to be, right? And he
Gets it
turns
down
that
to simmer.
thermostat. Yeah, right. Najee Harris, I guarantee you, he's coaching to a standard, but I guarantee you what he needs to do to get Najee going versus what he needs to do to get Pickens to hit the standard. It's the standard, right? And I say water finds its level. His water level is up here, and he wants everybody to rise to that level. And how he does that is the beauty of why he's a great coach. And that's the beauty of why Andy Reid is a great coach, right? So that's where you have to be when coaching really, really talented players. And also,
So you're pretty
when
sure
they're not
Belichick
talented.
had a thermostat too.
Oh, I know for a fact. Listen, they don't compromise the principles of winning. They just have to do certain things to get people to get to that level. And
Because
then,
everybody's different. It's not every
right,
player is all 53 are not the same human being.
correct. And then here's the thing: when you get 3 or 4 of those guys that think like Malik Nabers, then they start to pull the other guys that they have relationships with. And then that level starts to rise. Right now, you got one guy up here who really burns and really gives a shit. And the
On
rest of the guys
offense.
are just going, yeah. And the rest of them are just going like this, right? They're down here and water finds its level. They've
Yeah,
got to
because
rise.
there's one guy that has clearly set the standard, who understands what the standard is. And according to every report that I'm reading, is he's done for the year, is
Dexter
Dexter
Lawrence.
Lawrence.
Sure. Yep.
And I don't even know what to say, because first of all, I don't know what the heck's going to happen with the Giants' run defense now, with Kamara coming and then Derrick Henry coming and Lamar Jackson the week after. And to not have your standard there. I know now it's time for Bobby Okereke, who is a pros pro, who played 100% of the snaps last year. He had 150 tackles. He had, what, 3 interceptions. He was all over the place. He was a Pro Bowl player. He was one of those guys that if the Giants had a few more wins last year, Okereke gets his acknowledgement and gets the Pro Bowl. That's how well he played
Absolutely.
last year.
Yeah. And he hasn't forgotten how to play. So injuries happen. So Shane Bowen, figure it out. Like it's when you see a team that's a poor tackling team, that tells you they're getting players somewhat to the football, right? If the first hit is at the line of scrimmage and the guy's running through, and then he gets to the next level and he's gone, then that tells me that there are some things that are right. I will tell you the run fit aspect of it is what's wrong. Because you have guys that'll just go in there and blow up a guard, but then the guard just grabs him and the ball goes through the hole, right? So you're meeting the guard at the line of scrimmage, but you have sacrificed yourself. So now you don't have an advantage. They're playing 10 on 9 in some instances when he goes through the hole. Um, so look, Shane Bowen is the coach. He's got to figure it out. We too late in the season to say they're close. They just got to make tackles, and they have to have the proper run fits. Like, there's, schematically, you cut the film on and you see guys in place, but then you see guys that can't get off of blocks. Well, have this walkthrough about run fits. Talk about what the expectation is in a walkthrough. What shoulder, what hand are you gonna, those are things. Because if you can get to the line of scrimmage, and that's the one thing that both Micah and Bobby do well, they attack the line of scrimmage, they play downhill, but both guys get gobbled up. Bobby is a little more crafty in terms of ducking under blocks, and he's that's one of his favorite moves, is ducking under and knifing in, knocking a football out on running backs. He did it on the goal line again last week, but the run fits are just awful. Elijah Chapman, he's, in there playing hard, but he just doesn't even look like he knows which offensive lineman he's supposed to engage, right? Looks like he's just trying to engage two. I know they have a very good defensive line coach. They have 2 good defensive line coaches, but again, what is the philosophy? What is, are you adapting your scheme to
You
the
have to.
talent, or are you just saying, here's my scheme, you guys run it, which is not a good thing. But right now, there's still games left in the season. Young players have got to play. Guy like Wan'Dale Robinson, again, look, He's shown promise. Now he's just kind of a guy, right? Well, receivers can sometimes only be as good as the quarterback throwing them the ball, right? There have been some instances where he's been wide open, so you can't say he's not a good player. Let me just say this. You can't say he's a bad player. We just can't say how good he is because of the circumstances around him. But again, your standard bearer right now is your rookie wide receiver, number one, on offense. Standard bearer is Tyrone Tracy. There's some things out there that guys have got to rise to that level. And then again, from a personnel standpoint, there are some bad players on this roster. There are bad players on everybody's roster. How do you get the most out of your bad players before you move on from them? That's the thing about it. And this is their challenge right now because, your season is lost, but the coaching and the playing has to continue, right? And for both players and coaches, you gotta do a job that says you're worthy of another opportunity because these are the things that you are improving on. Somebody's got to get through to Deonte Banks and say, "Find your magic, kid. You were trending at the end of last season. Right now, water found its level with you and it's low. Be better than that." And there are always circumstances. I bet if I had this conversation with every player and every coach, they would tell you, well, this isn't happening and that hasn't happened, and this is why this is what it is. John Michael Schmitz, find your level, bro. You're inconsistent at best, and you've got to be better without the other pieces around you. You are a draft choice that's supposed to be a difference maker. And again, the fans are not dumb when they cut on these tapes and they show things, but they don't see all of it, but they see enough of it to try to draw a conclusion that, oh, this guy is a bust, this guy is a bust. You got to be better than what you are as a second round draft choice.
Yeah, I mean, you can cherry pick through every game.
Yeah,
And you
there's
can,
always a clip
yeah,
somewhere of
you can,
somebody
of
showing
course.
something, but the body of work for a guy like Evan Neal there's no disputing. There's no defense of that. Um, the body of work of John Michael Schmitz, he's not, he's got probably equally bad plays as he has good plays, and his bad plays are showing flaws that he's got. If he's going to be the center of the offense, he's got to be better at his hand placements, his footwork. Again, he's a wrestler. He's supposed to be able to play with leverage, and he doesn't even anchor well. So,
you told our audience this, and you and I have known each other since 1988 when you were playing. And I mean, I remember you telling me this even back then, and maybe it was from Belichick and Parcells, but when you put something on tape, this is a vicious, vicious league
yep,
played by vicious people and coached by vicious people. And until you prove that you can fix your
yep,
weakness, there's no pity party. They
none.
are going
They
to
don't
attack
care.
it and attack it
Yep.
and attack it until the cows come home, and nobody's going to feel sorry for you.
Right. And you don't get a next year to prove it because this year, every game, every play for the rest of the year, they are going to try to embarrass you. So you've got to prove worthy. You've got to get your needle moving in the right direction. Um, or else, you're not going to be in this league long. Right. But when it comes to personnel, like I said, it's not an exact science. But your hits have got to be so loud that nobody's paying attention to your misses, right? Or you got enough hits to where you say, yeah, I didn't hit on all of them, but the guys I got are making a difference. Right now, um, the difference makers are Tyrone Tracy, Phillips, Nubin to a degree, um, Neighbors, obviously. Um, this is where they are. Pinnock, I think, is going to be a good player for them. I think his identity as a football player. I think he needs to be a little more assertive. I don't want to call him a nice guy out there on the football field, but I think he can be more assertive. Um, but that's not a miss either. Pinnock is going to be a good player, but his attitude adjustment is just he's got to feel like he can be more domineering. Yeah, okay, so he's not McKinney yet, but McKinney wasn't McKinney until he was, right? Um, but this kid, he's got to be more assertive. And again, Bob, I don't know if it's a system that they're in. I see a lot of talent that just hasn't ascended. I see some talent that has regressed. Um, that's both on player and on coaching. They've got to feel good about when they go out and do their job. So I don't profess to know what Shane Bourne is teaching in the classroom. I have a pretty good eye for these things. Um, Played it at a very high level, have had to learn every position on both sides of the football and special teams, and was pretty good at most of the things I did, right? Or better than pretty good. So I can, I can look at it and tell you with some level of certainty what's missing. And they've got to find it. These young players, coaches have got to coach the rest of the year. Um, and they've got, listen, they're all fighting for their jobs too. So you can show improvement. You can show your players. You got to have some success stories with some of your young players too. And that's where they are. I mean, it's not much to talk about in terms of what they're playing for, other than
Their jobs. They're playing
yeah,
for their job.
exactly.
This silly, wild, crazy fan segment of fan base about the tank and the, oh, good, it's another loss. Just keep losing.
Yeah.
Like, listen, when you go to Pro Football Reference and you look up quarterback, you look up his wins and losses, and they are judged in that way. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The other one who's judged in that way is the head coach.
Yep.
That is his record. They put it up on TV.
Mm-hmm.
They put it up on the pregame show. They put it up on postgame. They put it up during the week. You are defined by your record, your division titles, your playoff record, and eventually Lombardi trophies.
Yep. Yep.
So Brian Daboll's record is taking a pounding here in the last 2 years. No one, when people look at it, no one's qualifying it by saying, well, yeah, but they were bad and they were kind of trying to lose game. They were tanking. Like, no, he's defined. And if for whatever the reason was that it doesn't work out in the long haul here somewhere, it affects your next.
Yeah. They know that.
Yeah, I know, but there's fans that don't really understand that.
Yeah. It's the business they chose. I know there are a lot of opinions about, whether coach should be retained. And, I see these people are battling back and forth with the different opinions from, the beat writers. Some have dug in on one side, others have dug in on another side. I personally would like to see Daboll back. I would personally like to see, I think Joe Schoen's a very smart guy. I think he's learned some things though. And I think this league has learned some things about the value that the metrics place on players. This age as compared to salary, as compared to, and it discounts production, right? If a guy is highly productive and you use his age against him, and you use that as a way to keep salary down. There are three examples that have literally turned the metrics on its head. And these are the unicorns. Um, Jacobs in Green Bay, Barkley in Philadelphia, and Baltimore. Nobody's questioning whether or not they have 5 more years left. It's what they're doing right now, which you decided they weren't worth. And it's not just Joe. It was league wide, and there were a few teams that decided to take a flyer on it because they said, this is the piece we need, right? Derrick Henry,
Fun fact: a lot of these regimes don't last 5 years.
right,
You're right. What can you do now? Your
right,
windows are about 3 years at this point in
correct,
today's NFL.
right. So the miss by, I don't even want to call it a miss because they got a really good running back in Tyrone Tracy, who's, going to be really good for the team. But I want to say that it's not even a miscalculation, but it's the influence of the metrics over the human element, or that weighs more than the human element. And in Hard Knocks, and again, not a this. I probably shouldn't say this because I think fans are gonna look at this differently. But I'm just gonna say this is a learning. And it probably happened with Henry and with Jacobs also from their ownership. When John Mara asked, was it John Mara or Tim McDonald on Hard Knocks? They asked Joe, what does this do to our locker room? And I know that's what Tim said. And then in another segment, John Mara said, he is by far our most popular player we've had in a very, very long time. And he's great off the field. It's kind of giving you a cheat sheet, right? But he's going to respect your job. He's going to respect what you bring to the table. And he said, I'm paying a quarterback X amount not to hand off to a $13 million running back. It's okay because everybody else, with the exception of three teams, thought the same thing about Henry, about Jacobs, and about Saquon Barkley. So the learnings for these general managers, look, Joe Schoen didn't miss on Tyrone Tracy, but that it's loud what's happening in Philadelphia. And Saquon wasn't going to be that here. But I guarantee you.
Yeah, he would not be having the same year with the
Right.
Giants.
But here's what happens. Here's what happens. If he's here, Daniel Jones is a better quarterback with him on the roster because they can do more things, the RPO and all of that stuff. But a decision was made, and it was based on, the metrics and all the other things they factor in. And he didn't miss on Tyrone Tracy. So he has that. But it's just so loud what Saquon Barkley is doing, and it just brings into focus the two questions that were asked. What does it mean to our locker room? And it's basically saying, is he worth another couple million for everything, the intangibles that he brings? They stuck to what they believed in. And again, there were all but three teams that did the same thing. Because there's not a team in the NFL that couldn't benefit from those three running backs. I don't care what's on your roster right now, right? Those guys are unicorns. But he hit on a running back in Tyrone Tracy. It's just loud. But I think I say that to say I think Joe's super smart. I think he gets how the league is run, um, the modern NFL. But I would note to all of these young, bright general managers, they still played by humans. Got to factor that in. Some players are adversarial, and I get the positions you take. Other players, you got to give more weight to some of the intangibles that they bring, and those are learnings. But people leaned in. The entire league is leaning into the analytics, and I love it. But just understand, humans play it, they factor in, and you got to factor that in. So when someone asks you a question about the human element of a player you got to make a decision on, you got to say, let me get back to you. Let me think on this a little bit, right?
Yeah, to relitigate Saquon again is
No, again, it is what it is.
well,
He
but
didn't miss on his replacement.
no, well, and the other component of this is you got to look at everything in totality, in the sense that it made him a very competitive offer
Yeah,
in
I
the
mean,
buy
look,
of 22 and then in 23.
right.
And he was talking at that point, his representatives wanted McCaffrey money. They
Hmm.
weren't going to go there for that.
And
So,
that's their right. And he should ask for that, right?
correct. Everybody's right.
Right. So I'm not, again, like I said, I'm not killing Joe Schoen for this, right? But it just got amplified when you look at the two questions asked and then what he's doing elsewhere. But again, they offered, like you said, they were competitive offers. They were good offers. But Saquon made the business decision. Um, and he's doing what he's doing, which would not have happened here. But I'm all about players getting as much money as they can. So I don't begrudge him one bit. And I think he did his part in being a great Giant and giving the team everything he had. So it is what it is. That's why I think for Joe Schoen, he should come back. And Art Stapleton made an analogy, and I kind of put it out there too of people saying why should he get another year, and I just harkened back to the early years of George Young, where their tenures are similar in terms of record, right? And George hit on a couple drafts. He hit on my draft and about three more after that, and we were off and running, right? But prior to that, he had six, and the team wasn't very good. I mean, he had Lawrence Taylor, obviously, but then the other pieces just weren't good. And he didn't have a quarterback for a very long time either. So,
Yeah, because Phil was always hurt.
yeah. So, and people say, well, that was a different era of football. It was still football. It was still the same. Whatever their era was, there was a period where everybody else was better than your team. And this is exactly the same. You can make analogies, right? But the analogy, and trust me, folks, I'm not campaigning one way or the other. I'm telling you, I like both of these guys. But there was a patience with ownership. It's in the same family. There was a patience in ownership, in I don't want to call it a sobering look because it's sobering what they're looking at now, right? But just looking at a roster and seeing what was needed and seeing if guy could get other pieces in place. They allowed George Young to do that. And obviously there was probably about 10 years of prosperity. And then it fell off, and then that blueprint was in place, and Ernie Accorsi followed suit and just started acquiring great talent, and they got back to two more Super Bowls. So
Well,
I like Joe. I like Dabes. I would love to see them come back. I don't have a dog in the hunt. I'm gonna be where I'm gonna be, but I think they're both competent and qualified. But I don't, those decisions are above my pay grade, and but there are some learnings that happened. We'll see what
hey,
happens.
look, yeah, look, since you mentioned George Young, now in that era of the NFL, what was different was, first of all, there was no free agency, so it was really harder to dig out of a hole.
But
And
here's the thing. Here's the thing. It's the gift and the curse
yeah,
because when you have no free agency, you had players long enough to develop them,
well, yeah, I mean, well, I'm going to
right?
give you that. I'm going to give you that example. George's first draft, the only two players he got out of his first draft were Phil Simms and Ernest Gray.
Mm-hmm.
And then his second draft, he took Mark Haynes in the first round, home run. And the only other player they really got out of that draft was Scott Brunner. But then in his third draft, he got you Lawrence Taylor. In the third round, John Missler was a good player.
Mm-hmm.
And in his third draft, Bill Neal went in the fifth round. Billy Ard went in the eighth round. And Byron Hunt went in the ninth round. Then his next draft was Butch Wolfork, Joe Morris, with his first two picks in that draft.
Yeah, and Wolfork was one of the top picks in the draft, and it didn't work out at all.
Right.
That was a big miss.
But then here's where it clicked in. Draft number 4. Terry Kennard, round 1. Leonard Marshall, round 2. Carl Nelson, round number 3.
Andy Hedden.
Andy Hedden in round 8. Perry Williams in round 7. Ali Haji Sheik in round 9. Even Robbie Jones in round 12 and John Tuggle in round 12.
Mm-hmm.
And Kevin Belcher was a 6th round pick. So now it starts to change. And then, of course, the Carl Banks draft with Carl Banks, William Roberts, Jeff Hostetler, Gary Reasons in the first 4 rounds, Lionel Manuel in the 7th round.
Elvis Patterson as a free agent, Bobby Jones as a free agent, Bobby Johnson as a free agent.
Then it got obviously George was playing chess while everybody else was playing checkers, because then the drafts just get sick. Like Eric Dorsey, Mark Collins, Eric Howard, Pepper Johnson, John Washington in 86.
Yeah.
Bavaro. I mean, whew.
Yeah. And we forgot, speaking of tight ends, the Giants a big hit on their tight end draft this year. They've got, look, the tight ends that they have on this roster right now that were drafted or free agents, pretty good players. They got a future for this team. So these are the parallels that you can draw from George Young when the team was in the desert and he brought him out, Joe Schoen when the team is in the desert and he's putting together some draft. Like, yeah, there were some misses. Hell, Conrad Goody in my draft was a miss, right? They had a lot, and they had a lot of players they could bring in during that era. There were some misses. There were some big misses, but the hits were loud, so you didn't pay attention to the misses.
Damn,
and that's where they had to be.
I'm just looking at this. So obviously in 2004, they traded for Eli, plus they drafted Chris Snee and Jabril Wilson. But man, did Ernie Accorsi kill it in 2005? Because remember, he lost all of his draft picks in the Eli trade.
Yep.
No first round pick. But how about this draft? Corey Webster, Justin Tuck, Brandon Jacobs, rounds 2, 3, and 4.
Mm-hmm.
And then they took defensive end Eric Moore in the 6th round. That didn't work out. But holy cow, you talk about making the most of little.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's where we are, folks. Not much else to talk about in terms of the season in and of itself, other than the players that have got to turn the corner, or get the needle pointing back in the right direction. What coaches need to do, and with these young players, how they've got to step forward. And again, water finds its level. Malik is up there. Y'all better get up there with him, because he ain't coming down. And it's the longer you lose, the more petulant he's gonna be. He's gonna be angry about it. And I get it. I love it. He might not say the things that you want to hear, but you just know why he's saying them. You know exactly why he's saying them, because he is not a loser and he ain't lost much in his entire athletic career. So, and he doesn't appear to be compromising that one single bit. So, yep, he's an outlier. He's got bad body language, all the above. That's like coming home and seeing your parents, your dad in a bad mood. You know, something ain't right. And that's what he is right now.
All right. We'll be back next week to do a preview of the Giants and the New Orleans Saints at MetLife Stadium, as the Giants will try to get that first home win of the season.
There's a path to victory.
Path to victory. There is a path to victory. You're 100% right. How do we like to end it?
Tell a friend to tell a friend.
Believe in Giants.